listening to the Small Town Queer podcast produced by Tweed Regional Museum in northern New South Wales, Australia. Follow us as we uncover and explore Tweed's rich queer history from the early 1900s to the present. The museum has collaborated with LGBTQIA+ community members to collect, share and preserve the histories of Tweed's many and varied queer voices. We wish to recognise the generations of local Aboriginal people of the Bundjalung Nation who are the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast today. My name is Emma Shield.
And my name is Erika Taylor, and we are the curators of the Small Town Queer digital project and exhibition.
Hello, on today's podcast we're talking to Jordan Clayden-Lewis. Jordan is an author and content editor who grew up in Murwillumbah. Since a young age, Jordan has had an adventurous imagination, a love of exploration and a passion for storytelling. Jordan has recently had a monologue published by Currency Press in an anthology titled This Was Urgent Yesterday, which has been acquired by the museum. It's a collection of short scripts written by regional writers all around Australia. The book is now circling various high schools in Australia for drama classes. In addition to fiction writing, Jordan has written numerous articles for SBS News, BuzzFeed, and the Foundation for Young Australians. Jordan has written about growing up gay in regional Australia and his experience with homophobia. Welcome, Jordan, and thank you for joining us for the museum's first ever podcast series.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. So we're starting the podcast series with all of our participants by asking, how do you identify as a small town queer?
I think apart from being queer and having grown up in a small town, I would say that I identify as a small town queer by being involved in this milestone project for the queer community of the Tweed Coast region. Okay. The region, I feel like, hasn't ever had something like this to be birthed, so I feel pretty honoured to be a part of the history of my hometown and sharing my...
We're very glad to have you be part of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel as if, my passion for sharing stories comes from fulfilling a purpose, and that purpose is essentially sharing stories that can relate to people on many different levels, and I'm glad that I could do that with Small Town Queer.
Great. And so tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
So I was born in Gosford originally, and I lived on the Central Coast until I was about 5. And then I moved up to the Tweed Coast region with my family to start kindergarten. And I lived in Boggangar for most of my life. And it was only when I was 18 that my family and I relocated to Pottsville. So most of my life I've spent living in the Tweed Coast region, except for years I spent travelling between 2016 and 2019. And when I moved down to Sydney area at the beginning of this year to pursue my writing career.
And I mean, how was that experience from going and living in regional Australia to moving to the city? And particularly from the point of view of being an open queer person?
Yeah, so it's definitely different. I mean, it's definitely different living in a city than living in the Shire. But I mean, my workplace office is in the middle of the Surrey Hills, and 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, getting off the train at Central Station is a little chaotic sometimes, but I feel like it's something that you definitely adapt to. I think things are happening at a much faster pace than that of a regional area like the Tweed Coast. But personally, I haven't found it too much different, especially being queer as well. I seem to have attracted similar friends and activities that I did when I was living back in my hometown. I feel like I've just adapted to the different setting. I think one thing that I will note is that there's quite a few queer community groups that are in cities, but those groups I seem to be present in regional towns.
There's a sort of a lack of visibility, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to see more of these community groups in regional areas. And not only because it's something, I wish was accessible when I was younger, but because I think young queer people should have access to groups of people that share the same preferences as them and, make them feel as if they aren't so different after all. So I feel like, yeah, small town queer is definitely something that's really good for the Tweed Coast region.
I mean, and what was your experience like in high school?
Life in high school, I feel like it was a bit of a love-hate relationship, which I feel like is a thing a lot of kids experience. I made some amazing friends in my schooling, which I'm still friends with to this day, which is something that I feel like I'll always be grateful for. I went to a Catholic school in a really small town, so I feel like the queer part of me wasn't fully explored until I left high school.
Right.
I mean, at this point, while I was at high school, same-sex marriage still wasn't legalized in Australia, so I feel as if me and everyone else that I knew at that school who identifies as LGBTQIA really did live in secret. And I believe that this was a mix of two playing factors. I feel like one, that being gay still wasn't legally accepted in societies like it is now, and two, that Catholicism also saw same-sex marriage as a sin. And now, from what I can remember, that aspect of exclusion in Catholicism at my school wasn't ever brought up. It was just never really talked about. And I think that this disconnect and this lack of education from having queer culture as a normalized fraction of society was a reason why no one at our school ever came out while we were there. I think no one came out until after high school, including myself. And I think it's, until we started exploring the world out there, outside that bubble that we'd been in our whole lives. But yeah, I'm just glad that, we can now be who we are freely. And I'd say it's a lot different now in schools as well, now that same-sex marriage is legalized and more accepted within society as a whole. And school kids probably do feel safer coming out at an early age now, which is great. And I'm glad that, society on a whole and the law are keeping up with the evolution, I guess, of humankind in that aspect.
Do you feel like being a writer, being a storyteller is important to your queer identity, or does one inform the other?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's something that being a young queer writer is something that I've only recently embraced. But yeah, I love it. The queer writing community is a really good one to be involved in. It's niche, but it also has a strong sense of community about it. It could be small things like networking with other queer authors on social media that makes me feel less alone, I guess. Because writing can be quite a lonely career otherwise. So if you aren't actively collaborating with other writers, which are similar to you, it does, get a bit lonely sometimes.
And does that sort of sense of isolation or regionality factor into your writing? Or the regional experience?
I mean, I would say so. I mean, it's something that's, I guess, growing up in a regional area, being gay, I guess, it's something that has shaped me to become the person that I am today. And I feel like without that experience, I guess I wouldn't be who I am today, if that makes sense.
Yes. And are there particular subject matters or topics that you enjoy or aim to explore in your writing?
I mean, I definitely want to explore more queer stories in terms of queer, even just after finding out about small town queer. It actually has inspired me a lot to, find more queer stories that are out there that have happened in history. Because, until small town queer came about, I never really considered the history or stories that might be out there from regional areas. And it's really fascinated me so far, especially the Mandala community in Uki.
That's a very, very interesting period of time in our local history, but also that for the country. So is there, you can speak quite freely on this, but anything in particular about Mandala or?
Yeah, I guess like, just the thing that interested me about Mandala was that like this whole time growing up, I never knew that, Australia's first ever gay commune was based so close to where I grew up. And I guess it just goes to show the amazing stories and history that there is out there, waiting to be found. And it's really just inspired me to explore more queer regional history. And, it could, be good inspiration for my fiction or non-fiction projects someday. Yeah.
Definitely. I think we certainly found that these stories are there. You just have to have the inclination and the inspiration to go and look for them. And they have been hidden and covered up, ignored, and we're sort of exploring that side of the equation as well with the queering of the museum, which will be a separate podcast. And there's obviously an article that we talk about that process. But I just wonder with writing, do you, how do you feel about being called a queer writer, or do you prefer to be called a writer? I mean, is that problematic at times? Do you feel like you're being pigeonholed into sort of having to always write about your identity or include a queer narrative when you're writing?
I think like, both of them are fine with me. Like I'm fine with being called a writer, and I'm fine with being called a queer writer because I am queer and a writer, but like, I get called both. So I guess I don't really mind being pigeonholed into that. I kind of knew that I wanted to be a writer ever since a really young age. I'd always been writing fiction stories and coming up with different worlds within my own mind, even from the age of 10. And it was only until high school was coming to a close and that I, really wanted a career as a writer. So I went to university and did a creative writing degree, and then I worked freelance for about 6 months to build my portfolio, and then I landed my first full-time writing job down in Sydney. Apart from writing for the media as my full-time job, I write a lot of fiction as well, and I've been particularly passionate about writing more queer stories.
Knowing the history of places like Mandala and the queer history of the Tweed Shire, what would that have meant to you growing up in the area or being in school and having learnt about that history at that time in your life?
I feel like, growing up, if I would have heard, I guess, about Mandala and small town queer as well, I feel like, my identity and like a lot of other people's identities, I guess, would be more normalized, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely.
But, at the same time, like, what's happened has happened, and what is now, if you know what I mean.
Yes. And I think it goes to that point about representation, seeing yourself in the media, in the history books, in museum exhibitions, and seeing yourself or your community represented in a positive way as well too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's inspiring. It really is.
How do you feel about being labelled a queer icon?
I feel like it makes me feel good. It makes me feel as if I am part of history.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely your history making. So is there anything that you're working on now, or any of your past or current future projects that you'd like to tell us a little bit more about?
I guess one thing that I'm working on at the moment is a novel. that I'm working on. I'm not going to say too much about it, but yeah, it's a contemporary fiction novel, and it has very strong themes of gay romance, travel, fate, and numerology.
Oh, wow. I mean,
Yeah.
are there many contemporary romantic novels or stories about queer people?
Yeah, there is a few out there, especially recently as well.
So, Jordan, can you tell us about some of your favourite writing projects?
Yeah, so probably my favorite writing project was a recent one of mine, and it was a monologue that got published in an anthology in April this year, and the monologue's called Crossroads and Dusty Boots, and it stems from an experience that I had in South Australia last year. Me and about a dozen other writers were selected to go on a two-week long residency down there. So we went out to the Flinders Ranges, all of us, and there for 2 weeks without any service, and we were mentored by 3 Australian playwrights to write these monologues, which would be performed in theatre. Yeah, it was a really good experience, and it was just beautiful out there, just writing without any reception or any completely disconnected from the outside world.
Sounds like
and
the
I met,
most ideal writing conditions.
yeah, it really was. Except for the flies, of course. There was a lot of flies out there. But yeah, I met a lot of other writers out there whom I'm still in touch with to this day. So yeah, it was a really good experience, and I feel like the piece of writing that I got from that was definitely one of my favorites to write. So Crossroads and Dusty Boots is about a young teenage boy, and he's walking along a train track in the South Australian desert, and he finds a talking fur seal attached to the train track, and he has to save him and get him to the ocean. But yeah, the anthology itself is actually circling a few high schools at the moment, and is being used in for their drama classes, which is really cool.
And is that typically the audience that you write for, or are you?
For this particular piece, it was definitely writing for that age group, the young adult age group, probably high school kids. But usually I do write for adult. I usually write adult fiction.
Great.
But yeah, the anthology is available for purchase at the moment through Currency Press's website.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure many of our listeners will look forward to reading that. Thank you very much for joining the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Small Town Queer podcast. To hear more small town queer stories, subscribe to the series and like, share and review this episode. And check out the Small Town Queer playlist on Spotify, curated by museum staff and project participants. For more information about Small Town Queer, visit museum.tweed.newsouthwales.gov.au/small-town-queer. Tweed Regional Museum is supported by the New South Wales Government through Create Funding New South Wales. This project would not have been possible without the support and collaboration of the people of Tweed, who have generously shared their lived experiences, archives and objects with this project.